So I bet you're ready for the attacks of the industry. Let's do it. And here we go. I just need to resume my slideshow. So let me just do it quickly, and we are ready. So here we go. One more thing. That's my little body. No. It's all the same. Our company's mascot is actually a raccoon, so you can probably recognize it later. Anyway, welcome again. My name is Paula J, as you see, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here again. And I see a couple of faces that I know personally, so welcome back, and a couple of new ones for sure. So very, very nice to see you. Just a couple of words about myself and about what we do and why actually we are starting this conference with the attacks of the industry. So basically what I do personally, I'm the CEO of the company that is called Secure. We are celebrating literally 10 years in 2 weeks. So this is how long we are in cybersecurity. But myself, I'm in cyber for the past 14 years, observing and interesting changes how our industry actually evolves within that particular market. And what is particularly interesting in the whole scope of a cybersecurity is that that's something that is dynamically changing. That's why, even though I got this funny C role in my company, I still do penetration tests at the customer side. That's literally what I've been doing last week, but I'm going to share with you a bunch of stories about that particular customer. And in general, what is my background? It's pretty much IT. I've never been doing anything else. It has been always IT security. And eventually, I also become, and that's something new from the last year, Microsoft Regional Director, which is quite funky outside because I'm none of a director actually at Microsoft, and I don't work for Microsoft, and I criticize Microsoft whenever it's necessary, which actually we're going to be doing on my next session for the credential security. But in general, that's probably something, and this is how they describe this role, a person who converts technology into business. And that's quite interesting in cybersecurity, because cybersecurity, let's say 10 years ago, wasn't something very popular. And that's really what we're going to be talking about. So how industry receives different types of attacks, and are we actually vulnerable with the configuration of the systems as we have them right now? Is there something we can do better to make sure that that's going to be, of course, improved? I also tend to speak at the different types of conferences at the end, and basically sharing different types of tools at Black Hat or Microsoft Ignite, etc. So we also have a blog, secureacademy.com, where every tool I'm going to be presenting today, you guys are able to actually download. So all of our tools are free, and it's like an open license. So basically, enjoy. So whenever we are thinking, of course, about these attacks of the industry, let's start with a little bit of a security awareness idea. So how organizations manage different types of approaches to cybersecurity, and in general to things like, for example, social engineering. So literally last week, just to give you a super fresh story, I was delivering this pen test in Bahamas, which is, as you can imagine, an absolutely horrible place to work with. And nobody really from our team wants to go there. And if there's like, we really like the Caribbeans. We've got this kind of thing in our team that when it's winter coming, we try to fix the projects in the hot places. I mean, work needs to be nice, and the pen testing sometimes is really boring, so we're like, okay, at least we're going to do that. And when it's like summertime, then we're going to go somewhere, maybe Nordics, to refresh ourselves with a fresh breeze, etc. Right? So I'm over there in that place, and my job was actually quite interesting, because I was supposed to, at day number 1, do a little bit of a social engineering, get access to the customer, like a stock house, like a warehouse that they were having. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'm in job as usual. I'm a woman, I'm blonde, I know how to talk to guys. I'm sorry to say it this way, but yeah, that's kind of a little bit of that. So basically, I came into the place in the morning, and there's this guy, and I smiled, and there's this conversation going on, and he's asking me like, what are you doing over here, and what's your interest? So I took an iPad just to look very professional. It's all a matter of perception. So I came into the place, and I was like, hey, so how is it going? Nice to see you again. And of course, this is one of my punchlines, because to say to someone again, it's almost like motivating the other person to reply and respond the same. So he's like, oh, nice to see you again too. I'm like, another guy that is a liar, yes? He's never seen me before. Why he's saying this? But again, makes you feel more motivated. Yeah, that's a nice spot. Thanks for doing this. Perfect. I like that. So nice to see you again. Anyway, so long story short, what happened, I came into this particular stock and I explained myself that I'm here to actually do the audit of the inventory. Yeah, because I had an Excel spreadsheet empty, by the way, opened, and then I was like, yeah, see, so like that's my tool and so on. And he's like, yeah, do you have any permit? I'm like, no, I don't need a permit. And he's like, oh, why do you need a permit? Because I was here over a weekend and it's all good. And he's like, oh, okay, that was the easiest pen test, like social engineering I've ever had. So it was just a nice conversation, A. B, I said that I don't need a permit, so in the face, and he said, okay, and I just get in, yeah? And I was like walking in the stock, and my goal was to actually, steal something. Yes, it's not a nice word. But it was a stock with furniture. So I was like, what am I supposed to steal? Like a couch or something? And whatever, roll it out of a warehouse. That would be probably the best thing in the whole pen testing job ever. So, and I was like walking in this warehouse, and there's like nothing small that you can take. I mean, I still cannot carry the couch. So I was, well, let's do that. And there was like this big carpet out there. So I'm like, this is probably the smallest thing in the stock. So I took that, I put it on my arm, and I'm like, I'm going out. Yeah. And long story short, I took this carpet and I literally walked out through security. I waved to the guys. I was like, thanks so much, bye. And then wave back, and that was the end of the conversation. Yeah. So it wasn't really that technical, it was more about the physical security. I would never guess in my life that I'm going to be actually stealing a carpet. But at the end, what was the case is that these guys were not expecting that. Yeah? So the door was open, I was nice, so probably there's this case of a stereotype, maybe a female, maybe kind of like all things around me that made me look quite innocent in the guys' eyes. They didn't really get the context, and that's one of the most important things in cybersecurity, to get the context of our workplace. So if we are getting all these emails about, phishing, getting package from DHL, UPS, etc., there's always a context. We're not expecting them, so we don't get in. And you guys know it, but someone who is not IT savvy, then these guys always have problems with recognizing correctly a threat. And this is what we are talking about. Yeah. So this is one of the attacks of the industry that we name it, of course, as social engineering, because it always works. And within the whole history of the pen testing that I've been doing, and that social engineering part I'm doing for the past 10 years, I only had once a situation when there was a lady that was actually a HR manager, and she was the person that's supposed to hire people in a company, and she didn't see me, obviously, so she asked me the question, like, who hired you, actually? Because I haven't seen you, and that is actually one of these situations that were out there doubting in whatever I'm doing. Any other situation was pretty interesting. Actually, I managed to do also that social engineering on the HR director, so flipping the situation a little bit, it's not always HR that does this. So there was this HR lady out there in the room. Just to give you another story, she looked a little bit. Do you know the series Dynasty, like from years ago, the Carlington stuff? Yeah. So she was the typical kind of a New Jersey look, so like that kind of curly hair, like lashes, like beautiful. So I'm coming in, and she's an HR director, and I'm like, see, I would really like to print that boarding pass because I'm flying to Dallas tomorrow. Would you do that for me? And she's the one hiring people. She's looking at me, and she's like, well, yeah, I'm like, I see, I'm new. So, I mean, I don't know how to print things. So basically, like, would you mind? And she's like doubting. I'm like, what an eyelashes, wow. And that's the end of the conversation. She's like, oh, you think so? I'm like, yeah, man, I mean, this is perfect. You look so beautiful. And then, I mean, I know it's very not ethical, but who cares at the end? It's my job. So basically, at the end, of course, we managed to do that, yeah? So she was like, actually, it was also a funny situation too, because she was like, okay, I mean, you can do it by yourself. I'm like, really? Like, can I sit at your computer and do it? And she's like, yeah. And she literally took the mascara and she started to correct the eyelashes that I was like bragging about. And I'm like, can I open up this executable over there? And she's like, yeah, girl, do whatever you want to. I'm like, perfect. So this is pretty much what we can see in the organization. Let's sum it up before we get into techie stuff. So awareness comes with experience, of course. So in our organizations, we need to make sure that employees are correctly recognizing threats. Yeah, they don't need to be super techy, but they need to know what to expect, and they need to know what are the principles. So in general, knowing our workplace, knowing our context. And at the end, behavior comes with awareness, which means that they act. They don't know how the threat looks like, they feel it's bad, that's why they act. So they receive an email that they are not super sure about, therefore they are actually forwarding that to the IT, and this is their situations that they should act in. Of course, here we're talking still about different types of technical things, because if they do open an attachment, question is of what can happen. And in this conference, you will also see also the vendors, the solutions, where we are supposed to, in general, remove the admin rights from the user's perspective. So is it possible to create a technology out there that is like idyllic, not making us to feel bad that user actually does something? Because users can do whatever they want to at the end, because that's not their job to be IT security person, but our job is to make sure that whatever they do, it will not simply work out. Yeah? And this is really what we mean by this behavior that comes with awareness. And at the very, very end of the organization's security awareness and in general the culture in security, the culture comes with understanding. Yeah? So it means that we implement different types of procedures, solutions, etc. So anything about security framework in order to secure ourselves, because we understand what are the threats. And whenever we are thinking, of course, about the threats right now, that landscape has changed. That's why we are talking about the attacks of the industry, because 10, 12 years ago, we were really focusing on a different types of solutions, like what's going to be the best firewall for us, what's going to be the best antivirus for us. Now we don't really care about that. And what is really interesting, because we have good ones, is that within the past 10, 12 years, IT security has changed massively. And I've been doing a bit of a market analytics in that area. And what it appears is that when we were choosing all these firewalls at the time, once we made it, then it was a little bit of a silence. It was like 5, 6 years of silence. It was silence because we were like, okay, we got what we want. Now we can move forward. We can start doing something positive, implement this, that, new solutions, whatever, application management systems, etc. But security was a little bit pushed to the side because we kind of got it covered. But the reality is that, for example, and I have it on a little bit of a live example, this is where our company started to exist, because it wasn't silent at all. There were so many different types of threats from the inside perspective that people were dealing with, but it wasn't that loud until ransomware appeared. And that was the moment approximately 5 years ago when we started to understand that information actually has a value. So we do know that, of course, but that was the moment where we really could see the value, because we had to pay for it. Yes? So our data was encrypted, and then someone said that's going to be like 500 euros. If you don't pay within the next 2 days, we're going to publish it. Screw the money, sorry my language, but public shaming is the best way to motivate people to actually do something about that. Yes? So these are your pictures. If you don't pay 1,000, that's all going to be internet. Would you like to have your pictures in the internet? Well, So this is pretty much the situation. So things started to be complex. And this is something that I treat a little bit like a joke. You don't need to laugh, it's actually quite sad at the same time, because cybersecurity, being a firewall, being an antivirus, and that's pretty much it, started to become something like that. And how to be smart in this? Like, is there a possibility to know it all and to be like super comfortable with all the solutions that exist out there? We've got right now a concept of the privileged access management. We've got, from the Microsoft perspective, ATA, so Advanced Threat Analytics. We've got Windows Defender ATP. We've got Credential Guard, Device Guard. How do they work? And we've got what's coming, Exploit Guard with 2019. So it's actually, I'm very happy about it. It's a pretty nice solution. But that is, in general, the complexity that we are getting out of it over there. But even so, we've got that. There are still lots of different types of attacks that every single time works, because we are kind of overwhelmed with what's going on in security. We've got too much. But is it enough? I can tell you it's definitely enough. But there are a couple of things also to pay attention to. And we're going to be talking about that. Before we get to techie part, I'm going to use at the end of this summary my favorite quote. And maybe you've seen me already talking about it, but this is actually something that I feel is becoming more and more powerful, because Financial Times, as we see, they said, well, Financial Times obviously being a cybersecurity specialist, but in general they make kind of a sense over here, and they said that by 2019, market will need 6 million cybersecurity professionals. And that's awesome news. This is an awesome news, because it means that someone's going to be needed out there. So it's really worth to invest in cybersecurity on many layers. A, to secure ourselves, obviously, because of the second statistic that is out there on the slide, where we say that from 4 to 5 million cybersecurity professionals, this is something that we're going to have. So we got a problem, actually. So that means that, A, we need to start securing ourselves now, because maybe there's going to be a lack of skills, and there is actually. If you're working in that part of the industry, you probably feel that on your own skin, that it's so hard to hire someone in cybersecurity. We struggle a lot, yeah? So we search actively all the time for someone, and we are struggling, because what does it mean to be great in cybersecurity? And there's a couple of things that come in this area to my head. One of the things is, of course, it's good to be a cybersecurity consultant, because that's going to be in the need, but it's not good to be in a position of hiring someone, of course, because we're going to miss the skills. So it's really time to grow in that area, because the earlier we grow, the more we will be able to address this gap. And that is something that is nice to see. Whenever we are thinking, of course, about the techie part, so let's dig into these attacks of the industry. That actually indicates 4 areas over here. One of them is secure identities, information protection, threat resistant, and secure devices. So I decided to divide all of these attacks of the industry into these 4 areas, so that we got some kind of organization and a logical approach to the subject. And each of these areas has a little bit of a problem that is pretty much always working. And we're going to start with secured identities. Now, whenever we are thinking about secured identities, there's lots of different types of situations that are worth having a look at, that are unfortunately always working. And it's a big misconception sometimes about the technologies that we are using. And this is pretty much something that I would like to show you today. So one of the things that I would like to show you is, and let's start with something nice, is the situation where we are implementing credential guard. So when we do have actually a credential guard implemented, then it means that you are not able to extract different types of credentials from the operating system's memory. And just to show you, just for the reference, of course, we may know how it works and you might have seen it, but just to bring everybody on the same page, I'm going to be using that demonstration over here. Yeah, so what's the situation? Situation is that we've got over here a certain machine, and that particular machine, it's actually with the credential guard running. So I'm going to get into CQ tools, not CQ malware, but CQ tools for that matter. And at that certain moment, I'm going to get into the Kiwi Secure Edition, CLS. So this is the Mimikat, but it's a Secure Edition, our Teams edition, which technically I can tell you that it's not recognized by antivirus. Yeah? Why not? In our team, we decided to drop the brains on the table. That sounds quite disgusting, but in general, we took all the different types of antiviruses out there, and our job was to find out how do they work, and we developed our know-how that allows us to convert pretty much any type of a code into the code, like original Mimikatz, into the one that is not recognized by antivirus. And we have our like a tool generator for that. So technically, antivirus is like second generation of the antivirus. It's not really a problem for us. Yeah. Third one, though, so the one that is relying on machine learning, intelligent threat detection, so solutions like Defender ATP, Sophos, etc. So there are not many actually of them. These are the guys that are actually discovering our tools. These are the only ones that are doing this. So it's quite interesting. So long story short, with the credential guard, what is important to spot is the following: that I'm going to do privilege debug, of course. And then a standard thing, as we know, secure LSA, and then logon passwords. Fantastic. So that output gives us a possibility, let me just bring the machine again, gives us a possibility to recognize different types of credentials. Somehow I lost my cursor, so let me just clean it out a little bit. I'm just like moving my mouse, but it's kind of not visible here, like as you see. Let me close the machine window and reopen it again, because it's kind of weird. I could do that, but strange way how Hyper-V actually reacted, apparently. Let's do it again. Here we go. Connect. Hopefully it's going to be good. Okay, let's see. Yeah, this is my account over here. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, let's see. So long story short, we can see at that point that even though we go like farther up, here we go. Yeah, let's find the Freddy's account somewhere. So we can go, here we go. So we can see that here are no credentials for Freddy. Yeah, so it's like empty, and this is pretty much the credentials guard concept. Yeah, so all these credentials, they were virtualized through LSAS and through the virtual secure mode, and then we are not able to access those. Now, funny part about that is that when we get into, for example, situation where we've got a processes running as user, question is, can we take over certain type of identities? Because in general, what's the concept? The concept is that when the hacker or whoever gets into the certain machine, we want to steal credentials. We're like, no, we're fine. We've got Windows 10, we've got Labs implemented, we've got secure credential guard implemented, so we're all set. Well, not necessarily, because you can steal identity in various different ways. And we are not really talking about it. Let's talk about that, and let's learn why, for example, taking away from a user and securing ourselves from running unwanted code makes more sense than actually here a credential guard. So what's the flavor is that what we can do over here is that we can get into different types of processes and become a certain type of a user. Yeah. So right click, and then we're going to do miscellaneous. Here we go. And then we're going to get over here, and then we're going to do run as this user. And then we're going to just do OK. So let's do that. Fine. And then basically, who am I? And then we are a certain type of a user. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite examples where we use in operating system a privilege that we call impersonated client after authentication. And now, do we really need to have a password of a certain user extracted from the memory to be that user? If that user is logged on, you can take over that user's session. And we're going to get into more details, of course, about it in the credential security session that I'm having later on. So you will see what kind of little nice things we can do with different types of sessions of people, how we are able to take them over, etc. Yeah? So this is the first thing to dig into. Now, question, of course, of the universe is, what is, at the end, the most successful attack right now? Yeah, so let's dig into this one. So one of these things, and one of the attack patterns, is of course the identity theft. Yeah, so we've got a certain type of a healthy computer. User gets a particular email, and then we are technically somewhat lured to the malicious site where we can download something, click something, etc., and then something happens. This is a very big of a shortcut. Now, question is, how probable is that technically device is going to be suddenly infected with a malware? Because it sounds like, okay, there's this magic happens, and then, so how does this path happen? So it really depends, because what we call, again, an attack of the industry is to make someone to give us something. Yeah. So in the identity area, let me give you an example of that. 11th of September, so not really long time ago, pretty much a month ago, there has been a patch released by Microsoft, patching one of the biggest vulnerabilities this year, which were related with the permissions that you had to scheduled tasks. Maybe some of you guys were digging into the details of that, but this was a critical patch with the critical problem, actually, that allowed a regular user to take over operating system and become a local system. That's something that I'm going to be also talking about on the next session. So, in general, if that vulnerability is out there and if we're not patched, then that could be one of the reasons. Now, another example over here was we were doing the pen test at the customer site in Dubai. Really nice company, actually. Very rich company, also modern in the perception and anything like that. And when we were on the calls with them before the pen test, I'm sure you also hear these stories, but they were actually making a very interesting point immediately, almost like a very much defensive mechanism. We were asking, okay, guys, so what do you use for security? How does your infrastructure look like? And they immediately said, well, we are actually pretty well designed. Okay, great. And what we've got like 3 anti-spam filters. And we're like, why do you need 3 anti-spam filters? Oh, you know, because when one doesn't catch it, the second one does. And when the second doesn't, the third one. And the 7 does, and the 11 does. And we're like, okay, fine. So why don't we just have one, but configure it well? So what happened is that when we are getting on site, all that fantastic perception of security that they had completely crushed, because the first thing we did, we decided to do the SMB relay, which also we're going to be talking about today about, and we combined that with the NetBIOS responder attack, which is like so simple. So what we did, we actually appeared a pop-up with the request to authenticate to the file server to the, and this is my favorite, IT personnel. So we were wondering how IT personnel will react to the pop-up appearing to request to connect to an unknown name. And you know what happened, yes? IT personnel just logged in, because they are kind of maybe used to seeing this kind of a pop-ups, re-authenticates because your Kerberos ticket expired or whatever, I don't know. That was a very strange situation, but this was the way how we managed to get in. So even so, they had a fantastic technology, people actually were the ones that caused a little bit of a problem. So what's next? So this is really the attack vector over here. This is how we are getting inside. So I call it a little bit of a cheap hacking, because it means that you need to leverage a little bit of a social factor in order to do something, yes? Can we hit the Windows just like that? Well, it really depends on its vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. This is what we always say. The biggest vulnerability is actually a misconfiguration, but that misconfiguration needs to be there so that we are able to leverage that fact. And help desk logs on into the device. And that is the moment where we start having an privileged access and spread. Another example for that particular attack that was happening, I was doing a pen test in one of the biggest hospitals in Belgium. And one of the things was there, I decided to come there like super early in the morning, 6:30ish. So I am, and I decided to open the doors, yeah? So I'm a little bit of a person that doesn't have like a filter, so whenever I see the door, I'm like, okay, that's probably the door that I need to open, so I'm just getting in. And I was just sneaking through all the doors that were there, and I was testing the network sockets, if they work, so that I can get the IP address and pretty much get access to the hospital infrastructure. And yes, I did, and this was actually pretty easy. I'm like, okay, this is almost too easy. Let's figure out something else before the guys come back to work. And there was this kiosk at the check-in area. So this is where all the patients come in, and this is where they register. And it was actually pretty funny, because it's like a screen and the keyboard, and there were a couple of them. And when you see a screen and a keyboard, it's truly like an invitation to do something bad. So I'm like, fantastic, let's do it. So I decided to like work on this full desktop app when people register for the doctor's visit, yeah? And funny detail, and also not funny, behind me there was a granny, some granny standing, and I got that empathy out there, but she was really breathing so hard, like, yeah, look at her like this, and I'm like, come on, like, I got the task to do. Should I let her in, or should I do my job? So it's always, cybersecurity is not easy, as you see, so all these decisions you need to make. So basically, I decided to continue. And one of the things I did, it's so easy that it's like so shameful even to admit, that was a full desktop app. I did the shift sticky keys that actually dropped, and I got my sticky keys window out there. So Explorer appeared automatically. I'm like, come on. And then command prompt, come on, I'm a local admin, yes? In the kiosk. So, okay, fantastic. Well, what's next? I've got access to the internet, please. I'm downloading my hashdump tools. I'm executing this. I used the PSExec. Don't forget, PSExec in the license, it has written that you cannot use it for hacking, by the way. Who would care about this? But I cannot be politically incorrect, just saying, yeah? So, I have to mention that, because then later we'll be like that. I'm like, proclaiming the illegal activities. No. You just can't use PSExec for hacking, okay? So, long story short, I used the PSExec, and I downloaded my hashdump tools, which I will show you in a moment. I extracted the hashes. Okay, what's next? Pass the hash. Works as a charm. Super nice lateral movement. Over the local accounts. No labs implemented. So I'm getting into the file server. I'm logging onto the file server. Memory dump. I'm a domain admin, yes? The whole operation, up to 5 minutes, yes? So I was really excited, so I wasn't measuring the time, but it was definitely less than 5 minutes, yes? So she was okay back there. Like, let's don't, Okay, pass the hash attack. So, long story short, that story that I mentioned shows, of course, one of the most popular attack. And it's so popular that sometimes it's even boring. But I can tell you that statistically, pretty much every new company that we are getting to, it's vulnerable to that. Yeah, and not only they're not managing the local accounts, which I would say that that should be an absolute default in the current times, but they are also at the same time not managing the domain accounts. Yes, so there's a code that we don't know can run, one of the things. Lateral movement can happen. Credential guard, it's not there. Of course, not everybody's on Windows 10, and that's absolutely fine, but it would be lovely. So lots of companies are not there yet, and this is also creating a very nice space for the attack. So how does it work? In general, what's the case of the pasty hash? It really relies strongly on the single sign-on, so the SSO. And if, of course, we want single sign-on, we're kind of exposed to the pasty hash, but it really depends what kind of authentication providers we are using. Yeah. So in other words, if we want single sign-on at some point, depends on how, of course, then it doesn't mean that the pasty hash cannot be fixed. It can be fixed with the, of course, credential guard, etc. But that is kind of exposing us to certain risks, and let's talk about that. So credential guard in general will save us from that situation, and labs would save us from that situation. But the concept is very simple, yeah? So we've got a certain laptop where there is Fred. Fred has admin privileges, not a rocket science, not very romantic too, because we could be like, oh, we are removing administrators' privileges from the users. Awesome. Remember about the vulnerabilities, yes? So in September, there was one. If we're patched, that's fantastic because this is a goal, yeah? Now, if the user is in that situation, if the session is vulnerable, etc., then of course we are able to steal these credentials. And then we're able to perform the lateral movement depending on, of course, what we've got. Either we've got the local administrator's hash or we've got the Fred's hash, which we could also use to log on somewhere out there to be Fred on the other computer. So it really depends. In this scenario, it's actually local credentials being used, which could be fixed by implementing labs. Now, when we are logged on by using single sign-on to the other workstation, then we are able to do the memory dump. Now, memory dump and performing memory dump can only happen if you are a member of the administrators group, or if you are a local system, or, putting it in a generic words, if you have a debug privilege. So the one that we already use in this demonstration, because debug privilege is the one that allows you to open a process, there is a function like this, and effectively dump the whole content of the memory of that process. So debug privilege is something that we always recommend to actually get rid of, because for real, how often do we, on the IT side, developers it's a different story, but on the IT side, do we actually connect to processes? We don't. Do we open a debugger and like debug them live because we want to know something? We don't if that's not really part of our job. So why do we keep it? Yeah. So this is pretty much what we are talking about over here. And then eventually we're taking someone's credentials and then we are passing them, of course, to the file server so that at the end we are able to get access to someone's station. Now, long story short, whenever we are thinking, of course, about that operation, question is, of course, how can we perform that pasty hash, and how can we, at the end, move forward with these activities? So let's technically talk about that, and let's perform the pasty hash, and let's technically discuss at each of the levels how we are able to secure from that. So what we have over here is a certain type of a machine. And what I will do, I'm going to get into tools, where I've got, of course, psexec -s-i-d cmd.exe. So I'm elevating right now to who am I, local system. Let's find out. Yep, here we go. And next part that we're going to do on the top of that is a simple thing, which is a CQ hash dump version 2, sum dump to extract the hashes. Yeah. So that operation is absolutely simple. It can be done with many different tools. You can do it also to be ethical, to be clean on the copy of sum. So for that reason, you will need to copy two things. One is the system and one is the sum. System hive because there is a boot key. And boot key is the one that encrypts lots of different secrets in the operating system. This is also one of the cases that we sometimes tend to ignore. Sometimes we are like, oh, if we save the password somewhere in the operating system, it's going to be safe. Absolutely not, because in the passwords area, what is the case is that there are over 20 places in the operating system that have password saved in operating system in a reversible way. So every single time you actually put a password in the operating system, besides, with the exception of the logon password, which is stored in the form of a hash in a database, then basically this is extractable. And again, not rocket science, not very romantic. It has to be like this because of the operating system's architecture. So what do we have over here? is actually the situation where we've got, well, different types of hashes. Question is, of course, how at that moment we can actually get these hashes out. So what we will do over here, let me just do mark. It's kind of interesting because I don't see my mouse cursor, so I'm kind of blindly touching with the whole intuition and sensibility, which area should I click on, but operating on a keyboard is also a challenge, so why not? So we're gonna actually perform with that the pass the hash attack. So let's do that. Let me get back, and then we're gonna get into Kiwi Secure Edition, and we're gonna get into Mimikatz, and then of course privilege debug, again. Here we go. And then we're gonna do Secure LSA, PTH, and then we're going to do user, administrator, and then we're going to do domain, local host. Here we go. And then we're going to do another part, which is NTLM, and then we're going to paste the hash. Yeah, so I'm just going to put the E here because it's basically the one that I didn't copy. Here we go. So this is a new console, of course. And within this new console, what's interesting is that I'm here anti-authority system because I was actually running that from that console. The CMD will never tell us the real token over here. So what do I need to do is to get to tools and again to run psexec again and run it with the remote session cmd.exe over here. And here we are connected to the other server, and because of the single sign-on, we can see that we are actually here an administrator. Yeah, so this is the whole concept out there. How that could be fixed, it's absolutely easy. It's still an attack of the industry though, but the fix is absolutely easy. For that one, of course, as we already mentioned, Labs would do that fantastic job over here, preventing the code that we don't know from running. That would be doing a fantastic job over here. Not making users local admins, it could be a matter of vulnerability though. Then for that, we've got an exploit guard that is already on board within the Windows 10, and it's in Windows Server 2019 upcoming, and that is actually pretty nice, pretty awesome piece of a code out there in Windows that could prevent us from doing that kind of operation. We're going to be actually performing different things where exploit guard could fix that. It's still, though, it's probably still going to take some time until someone implements that kind of activity. Okay, so we've got that. Now, whenever we are thinking, of course, about some other things, so information protection, let's get into something a little bit hardcore in the morning, if you don't mind. It's going to be probably one of the most difficult parts of this demonstration. So first theory, then practice. In operating system, we've got plenty of secrets. We already mentioned that. So we've got system secret, local user secrets, and domain secrets, domain user secrets. Why do we differentiate these domain and local user? Because it really matters. How do we actually secure ourselves from the secrets perspective? Do we actually encrypt the encryption keys with the SHA-1, also our hash of the password, or MD4? And this is really what makes a difference. Let me explain that in a moment with the different types of examples. But for now, what is important to know is that in operating system, we've got a boot key, we already mentioned that. That is actually placed in the system hive. It's just a string, simple string. And at the end, that particular boot key indirectly, though in a pretty straightforward procedure, encrypts things like SAM, ntds.dit, LSA secrets, so the service accounts passwords, things like cache log on data, called by us cache credentials, which are not really credentials, by the way, but still things like computer account password, and really nice secret, which we call a DP-API system, which is actually a shared secret in between user and computer and system. So computer/system is the same. And that secret is your Wi-Fi password. Yeah, so these are the secrets that are protected by the boot key. Now, why do we care? Well, we do care because it's all data protection API. It's a crypto platform in Windows that protects our secrets. And seriously, I don't think we've got a choice but to understand it, because we all need to know how our secrets are protected. So for example, if you store your password in the browser, is it safe or not? Yeah? So we could be like, oh, I save it in Firefox, Firefox has this, I saved it in Chrome, Chrome has that. Well, we don't care about this. What we care, it's deeper, and it's like how your keys are secured so that you're gonna decrypt them so that they're gonna give us access somewhere. Things like KeePass, for example, is the same story. You could use KeePass, for example, and integrate it with the Windows logon session. It's a bad idea, I'm telling you already that right now, but you can do it, and that would be treated as a system secret too. So anything you encrypt with Windows, it's treated as a system secret, user secret, or eventually local user or domain user. Now, before we move forward to the demonstration, I think I will need to explain a little bit what we're going to be talking about. Yes, so that's going to be quite nice. So 2 things from now on. Before we get to system secrets, let's discover that. So this is basically local user, and that's the domain user. Now you'll become familiar with my art skills. They improved pretty much recently, but they were always very poor. So sorry about this. I'll do my best to keep it nice and clean and pretty. So local user logs on, and when the local user logs on, he or she enters a username. That is, of course, converted to the hash. Question is, what hash? Well, it depends what we need, actually. But as we could see, maybe even from the Mimikatz dump, you could see that it's not only MD4 that we are using out there. It's also SHA-1. Who cares about the SHA-1 in the current times? Well, Windows does. So let's have a look at that. So we do have generated MD4 on the top of that. Yes, yes. And that is compared with some database. Let's don't get into that part. Next part that is happening, we have generated over here SHA-1. Not on the top of an MD4, of course, but on the top of our password. And that SHA-1 is responsible for encrypting something in the operating system that we call a master key. And that master key is responsible for encrypting our secret. Yeah. Now, why this kind of intermediate layer over here? Well, master key is like a very simple blob of data, short data, and it just takes less time. It's for the efficiency. Now, that is changed a little bit for the domain user. And is it a good mechanism, by the way? Yes. Hey, question to you, by the way, warming up question. Why do we use actually SHA-1? It's not a question of a type, why not SHA-512? It's in general, why SHA-1, why not MD4? Haha, tortures in the morning. Habits. I would love to see it this way. Could be, actually, but it has a little bit of a security background too, yeah? So let me answer that. So SHA-1 is used because in a SAM database, what do we store? MD4, right? So if basically MD4 was the one that is protecting our secrets in the browser, if it was the one, so I have a password saved in Firefox, let's say for Facebook, yeah? And that password relies on my password's hash. That's the theory, and that's the practice too. It relies on it. So what it relies on? What kind of a hash? So if it relied on MD4 that is stored for the local accounts in the SAM database, your secrets will be vulnerable to offline access, right? So if someone gets access to your drive, that person extracts SAM database, so all technically MD4s, and then this person's like, okay, I'm going to take this MD4 and I'm going to run it on your secret. That's not supposed to be this way, right? So we need to make secrets that are user secrets independent from systems configuration. And that's the point. So that's actually positive, because what's happening is that your secrets are encrypted with SHA-1. So that if someone gets access to your SAM database, like we did, and extracts MD4s, then basically these guys are like, okay, great, why do I need it? I don't need it because I'm not able even to decrypt your secrets. So what these guys need to do is to crack it first. Then they got a password in a clear text, they calculate SHA-1 on the top of that, and then they run it on your secret. That's why that complexity is out there for the local user. There's a little bit of more complexity, for the domain user. So let's have a look and compare these two mechanisms, and let's execute them in practice. So we've got domain user logging on, and what's happening, the same. So MD4 taken from his or her password. And on the top of that, of course, we've got MD4 calculated. And now we run it directly on the master key. Why we don't use SHA-1 over here? Because MD4 of the user, so hash of the domain user, it's never stored on a workstation. Unless, small asterisk, you use hibernation, which is a bad idea anyway. Yeah. So if you use hibernation, then then you're going to have a problem. But if you don't, then cache credentials or cache logon data aren't actually storing that value. Cache logon data is actually using in Windows, and that's an awesome news, the function that is called pbkdf2, and that is a function that is used by LastPass, KeePass, Azure Key Vault, etc. So this is a very popular algorithm right now, which is actually pretty good. So we've got a domain user over here. Here we go, and that is MD4, this time encrypting master key, but there is a little bit of a problem. That master key has two options, master key 1, master key 2. And that master key 2 is actually this guy over here. It's actually encrypted with something else. It's encrypted with the private key from the domain. Now, what the hell is private key from the domain? We could be like, we don't have a PKI. Well, who cares? There is actually a key out there that is responsible for encrypting all of the secrets. So where's the thing? So this guy technically encrypts the secret, and this guy encrypts the secret. Now, private key from the domain needs a public key. And public key of the domain, it's in all of your profiles. So if you go to the roaming profile, you're going to find it over there. And that's a bad news for everyone, because this is also what indicates a need of implementing the code execution prevention, and I would like to show you that as a part of the demonstration, of course. So let's dig into that demonstration, and let me show you how we are able to get access to the secrets by leveraging access to the MK1 and MK2. And now it's getting just easier because we already know a little bit of a theory, and let's get into demonstration as we have it. So fantastic. So what's going to happen here? So what we're going to do is that we're going to technically reboot this machine, but before we do it, one more thing as well. Actually, let me just switch to the duplicated mode, because for some reason I don't see my mouse cursor, and that's a bit of a disturbing thing. So let's do that. Actually, it's kind of funny because for me in that screen I see the cursor, and once I move the machine to the projector, I don't. Yeah, so it's kind of a strange situation. So just one thing, and I will duplicate it, and then it should be all good. So I will just do that part. For some reason, that actually did this situation. Okay, and I got it, and I'm gonna duplicate these displays. Keep changes. Fantastic. Yes, so that will do. Okay, great. So let's move forward. So what we're going to do. So we've got this machine over here. And one of the things that we're going to do is actually verify if we are able to see if that particular user is able to read the secrets. So we've got a Freddy being logged on right now, and that's quite cool. And over here we've got Chrome Pass, and we're going to see that at that level, Freddy is actually over here, as you see. We're seeing the password. Yeah, so this is nice. Now, standard thing I would say, because this is a data protection API, saying every single app that you guys run. This is a lesson number 1, is actually getting access to your credentials. It may. So if you have anything really, whatever you execute on your laptop, don't forget that. That's why storing passwords in a KeePass makes a hell lot of sense, because anything you run as you has access to anything you run as you before. Yeah, so any type of a password you ever had is accessible by any type of an app on that computer. Yeah, or maybe, that's my point. So what we're gonna do now, we're going to actually get this guy, and we're going to restart it. And for the simplification, I will actually run that with at that certain moment, offline mode. And the reason why is because I would like to replace cache logon data to show you that at some point we do have access to user secrets, and at some point we don't. But we definitely need to know under what conditions that is happening. So what I'm going to do right now, for the domain user, I'm going to override its cache logon data. So let's do troubleshoot advanced options command prompt. And what I'm going to do over here, let me just quickly enlarge the font. I have no impact on that whatsoever from now on. So here we go. That's better. Fantastic. And let's get into the toolkit. So the toolkit is on a D drive, CQ tools. Fantastic. And then let's get into, again, Kiwi Secure Edition, Mimikatz. And now we're going to run the Mimikatz module that our team contributed to, because we fully reversed cache logon data. LSA dump, and then we're going to do cache, and then we are overriding it on D, Windows, System32, config, and then we're going to do system, and then we're going to do D, Windows, System32, config, security. Why these two? Because in the system there is a boot key, as we had on a picture on a slide, and on security, this is the place where we store cache log on data, /kiwi, enter, and that overrides us cache log on data. So by knowing the algorithm, we cannot really crack it. Why not? Well, we can crack it, let me put it this way, but it's going to just take a lot of time, because cache log on data in general, and its security, it's constructed in a following way. You've got username. You've got a user's password. That password, you calculate MD4 on the top of that. So you've got a hash. So what you do right now, you take the username, you take the user's password's hash, and you join them. So you got a value. And on the top of that, now it's becoming fun, you calculate MD4, and that value that comes out of that, you call DCC. DCC. And that DCC was out there in the registry, by the way, for the whole existence of Microsoft until Windows Vista came out. So DCC was actually credential cache log on data in the past. Now we've got MSDCC2. So what has changed? So you take this DCC, you run it within the function that is called pbkdf2, and you use that as one of the parameters. On the top of that, you add a random value, you add a username, you run it 10,240 times on 16 blocks, bang. So this is the value that comes out, MSDCC2. Can we crack it? Yes, we cannot reverse it, but it's just going to take time. It's a multi-dimensional cracking. So the rainbow table for that, it's definitely much, much bigger than for the regular hashes. So essentially, no point. So it's better to override it. No romanticism. Let's just break it. Why should we battle it? Yeah. So moving forward, we got that done, but what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to disconnect that machine from the network, because we need to leverage over here cache log on data. So let's do that. Not connected, not connected. Fantastic. And we got it. Next, and then continue. We're all set, disconnected. This was overwritten, so we're going to be ready in a second with the cache log on data to show you if we are actually able to see if the user is able to, after that modification, read its secrets. We are doing this on a domain user, yes? So this is this concept of the MK1 and MK2. So that's going to be fun. So let's learn the security of that. I will try right now to log on with my old password, which was password, etc. And then it will say that it's incorrect. This is the domain user. And I'm going to log on with the passwords mimikatz. Here we go. Where this is something that I've overwritten by pre-generating a cache log on data value, and this is what Mimikatz did over there, and I put it in the registry, and against that value, we are verifying when we are logging on. This is how cache logon works. So it's actually a pretty safe type of a logon, to be sincere. Now, whenever we are thinking, of course, about reading that information once again, we can go down somewhere here, and then we can go to the Chrome pass, and then that's going to take some time. Because what we are trying to do, we are trying to decrypt that MKs with our password's hash. In this case, MD4, because it's a domain user. We're trying, doesn't work, no. So this is basically the situation out there. And at the end, what happened is that we, at that certain point, didn't manage to get the password. So question is, are, in general, our secrets in the operating systems safe? And answer is, in that scenario, they are. In the other scenarios, which I will show you, they are not really, but in this scenario they are. So conclusion number one is, that is as safe as your password is. Yeah, that's the conclusion. So the better your password is, the better protected you are. But that's not it. Hold on. So what's the situation is, every single master key in the operating system, %app data %, is stored in the following place. App data, of course, roaming, Microsoft, protect, and we got into SID, and that's the place. Yeah, there's this value called preferred, and preferred, as the name indicates, it's indicating basically that that is a value that we should choose by default, but old secrets are encrypted with the old master keys. So here are the master keys that I have. It's actually a lot. Normally it's a little bit less, but you verify your own. If you really want to do a bad joke to someone, I like those, don't get me wrong. You would just go over there and delete that values here. You just delete this, yeah? What does it mean and what will happen? And that's pretty funny. Every single password that someone stores anywhere, it's just gone, yeah? Including access to the private keys of the user. Funny, right? So basically, if you really don't like someone, that is something to be deleted. Yeah. Could you recover your secrets afterwards? Not really. No. Depends on a couple of values over here. If it was a shared secret with system, like your Wi-Fi password, then you would be able to do it. But the rest of the things, not really. I'm happy to tell you even more about this. By the way, it could be an endless conversation because our team. And I'm absolutely not bragging about it, but that's a fact, is the only team in the world that fully reverse engineered the crypto platform in Windows. So anything really. Just ask the question and I'm happy to answer. In general, it's not a bad mechanism, yeah? But it has its own situations. So what I wanted to show you is the following. If we get into CQ tools, here we go. Then basically, within the data protection API, there, I've got different types of tools over here. And one of the tools, it's a kind of a new tool, by the way, that is released, that has been released by us last year, but it went to the public this last month. And this is a CQDP API blob searcher. And we decided to share it with everyone because it's nice to have that knowledge of what's going on in the operating system. And this blob searcher is something that you may want to run on your machine, if you trust our tool, of course. Yeah. We're all talking about not running an unknown tools, but yeah, now you know it, so it's a known tool, right? Okay, that's a logic, right? So let's just move forward. So we've got over here CQDP API blob searcher, and this is a tool written by our developer Michael, and it allows us to search through paths. So here we go with the path. So we've got a path directory to be searched, and then out there where you specify where DP API blobs should be extracted. Now, again, DP API is not a very romantic piece of knowledge, but it's actually giving you information where your secrets are, and we all want to know that, right? So if we do specify /d for directory, we could get into the users folder. So let's do it, Freddy. And then we've got app data, and then we're going to go into roaming profile, and that's it. And we could technically do this -r recursively, and then we can do that minus output, and we can specify that the output should be in the CQ tools, why not, and DP API, we could just keep it at that folder. Now that is quite cool, because what's happening over here, I just stopped it, by the way, because it's going to run, it's actually pretty fast, but it goes through every single detail of your profile files, and it verifies, so these blobs that you see over here, these are data protection API blobs, and it shows you what kind of secrets do you actually have. So that's quite nice, because we've got over here some secrets, so crypto, RSA, etc. This is a private key, export flag. So you can see a lot of different data where your secrets are. So this is what your system manages as well, but this is also what we've got in Windows. Now we're going to do one thing. I'm going to do that command in the DP API txt. Let's give it a small moment, just a small moment. Was it that quick? That's kind of strange. Let me see then. DP API txt. Yeah, okay, that was that quick. Nice, actually, cool. Normally it takes a little longer, but today it was quick. Let's search for Chrome. Awesome. And anything Chrome related. So let's just go maybe up at some point. Chrome, or let me search for the B5 in such a situation, because I kind of know what to search for. B5, because we are searching for the certain type of a blob. So that blob is in the user's profile, and our job would be actually to find it. Maybe we'll find it, let's see. We could also search for this. Sometimes it's a little bit chaotic, so let me just find it maybe manually as well. Maybe that's why it was like so quick, because it was not everything actually over here. Okay, let me just do one more thing then. We're going to search for that in the local profile. So we're going to do, instead of roaming, local, because I really want to show you something before we move forward. Local, and let's sort, why not, in the same file. That's going to take a little longer probably. Here we go. Yeah, it does take a little bit longer. We've got more secrets in the local store. I think we could just interrupt it about now. And let's do DP API again. Fantastic. And let's search for the Chrome again. Here we go. It's going to be plenty. I know. But this is how we can find it. Actually, we are quite lucky. So it's at the very beginning. Lovely. And here, you guys can see that we've got B55 name of the key. That's the one we are referring to. And that's using funky SHA-1 and triple des. Yeah? And it's not Windows, it's Chrome. So this is just a little bit of a news out there, because sometimes we are like, oh, Chrome is the best, yeah? And I'm hearing it lots of times. Fine, maybe you love it. I'm using it too. I prefer Firefox if it's my personal opinion, because actually of the cryptography that they use, Chrome uses actually pretty weak cryptography underneath. And that's one of the examples. They use SHA-1 underneath. That's not cool. But this is the way how they store secrets. And it's in the Chrome user data default cookies. Yeah? So, unfortunately. So what does it mean for real? It means that this B55 is actually the one that is responsible for the Chrome's password. So what does it mean in practice then? In practice, it means that if we go to the domain controller over here, and if we try to get access to the private key, and let me show you how to do that, we can get this private key to get access to the user's secret. So that's how it's happening. We've got tools. We've got, of course, we're going to get into the toolkit over here. And I'm going to leverage here the tool that is called CQ-ELSA Secrets Dumper. And CQ-ELSA Secrets Dumper allows us to export file, export.pfx. Let's do it. And let's run that. Let me just import it on that machine to show you. That is actually containing private key. This tool, by the way, that I just executed consists of 40 different mini tools that we leverage for the DP API. The password for that is secure, as you see. Next. Next, finish. Fine. Let's do here cert mgr.cert. mgr.msc, fantastic, all works. We've got certificates, not available. This one is available, but it doesn't really tell us who we are. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite things, and this is definitely an attack of an industry. Do you know why? Because it can't be fixed. Yeah. That's the bad news. Now, what does it mean what we see over here? This is a private key that you guys all have in your DCs. All. And the moment you set up your DC, and I set up my DC in 2012, is the moment that key is generated. Yeah? So if you did that in 2003, and if you do the migration, but without wiping your domain from the surface of Earth and setting up a new one, then that key is actually dated at that time. It's valid only for 1 year. Why 1 year? Just because. Don't ask too many questions. And basically, we've got over here, that could be a concept of a habit, actually. We've got over here RSA 2048. So now, statistically, on average, the citizen of Earth has a certain type of a device with him or herself. So statistically, with that average, we need 16 years to crack, which is completely a little bit artificial statistic, but let's say it, to actually crack 4096-bit key. So that could be cracked by a typical Earth citizen a long time ago, yeah? Because if we set up our domain in 2003, we had 15 years to actually crack 2048, yeah? Of course, if we do set up a nice cracking cluster, it's going to be much, much shorter, and that's really what we are talking about over here. So how do you feel about that? Maybe not very positive, but let me tell you one thing. That is actually a cookie. So when we go further, what we're going to do on Windows 10, and this is really the last part right now, is this. As a regular user, I'm going to play a little bit with a DP API. First of all, I'm going to generate a hash for my current password. Mimikatz, it was my current password actually, 1. Yeah, 1. So we've got this one. And this is nothing but MD4. And what I will need to do is to take the DP API blob that is encrypted with my old password, decrypt it with this private key from the domain, and then re-encrypt it with my new password hash. So we're going to do this redo operation, yeah? Let's do it. It's a very simple case. CQ master key AD. Right now we are like relaxing because it's just the last part. And then we are specifying over here new hash. And then we do that. And then we do PFX. And then we do exported PFX from the domain. I copied that already here. And then we do a file. And that file is actually our B55 secret, which is actually here. That's this guy here. So shift right click, copy as path. This is what the blob searcher showed us. We paste it over here. We do that. A new master key has been generated for us. Awesome. So we have re-encrypted that. So this guy, basically, we can just rename it. We can preserve it. Why not? And then we can take this AD modified part, and then we can do this. Enter. Yep. And last thing we need to do is to make sure that it has appropriate attribute. So for that, we need system and hidden. Let's move it on the top a little bit. And here we are giving it attributes, system and hidden, so that later, when we have an empty password over here, once we refresh it, we have a password back again, yeah? What's the conclusion? That every type of secret that you guys have, that you stored by using the crypto platform in Windows, it's to be stolen by whoever has access to this private key. And whoever has access to this private key is domain admin, whoever has access to the backup of the domain controller, and in general, whoever who has access to the domain controller, yeah? So who can do the memory dump, excuse me, on the domain controller. So this is one of the situations. So long story short, our infrastructure is as secure as our password are, but at the same time, as our domain admin is. And this is something that, of course, I wanted to show you. So this is not a very positive news, but it also leverages one very important thing over here, and let me turn back to the presentation, is that how can we protect from that? Well, from this one, there's only one way of protection. Let me do that. And that is actually, at that certain moment, implementing some code execution prevention on the domain level. And what we were discussing right now is a data protection API as one of the attacks of the industry. So what else do we have? Threat resistance, just to mention, yes? I was last year showing the attacks which were related with the SMB traffic. It's actually attack of the industry. It's still the case. So basically, are we able to play with the signatures of the SMB, the traffic not being signed? Absolutely yes. Normally, we might know that in between the domain controller and the regular communication between domain controller and client, that traffic is actually digitally signed. Anywhere else, it's not. So you can play, sniff, spoof the traffic as you want to, also leveraging the problems with the NTLM version 2 so that you are able to authenticate as a different types of users all over. And at the end, regarding the secure devices that we have, what is actually important within the attacks of the industry is how do we actually store certain type of information. And one of the biggest things that we see, which we also call an attacks of the industry, is actually the case of services. So the way of how services are configured or misconfigured in the certain operating system. And what we are referring to, it's a very simple operation where technically, whenever we are privileged user, of course, in the operating system, running maybe things as system, don't forget we are always at that moment able to get access to the local, to the system secrets. And in general, what's the case out there is that we've got, of course, a tool which you guys might know. We actually have a new edition of it released this year, and that is the CQ Secrets Dumper. And within here, we can specify the name of the service, TNA SRV, and as we remember, that actually gives us a password in a clear text for the service that is actually written or configured basically over here in the services console. Yeah, so this is something that is out there the case. Yes, and what we are referring to is the in this particular area a very important service which technically was configured with the possibility to extract the password from it. Yeah, so this is pretty much the situation. And the very important service, as you see, is running on the regular user account, and the password is stored in registry. So this is pretty much one of these things that we always should pay attention to, and fixing it makes sense by, for example, replacing it with the group manager service accounts whenever it's possible. So summarizing, what are the attacks of the industry? We were discussing a couple of things. Access to our secrets. We're discussing at that moment social engineering. We're discussing execution of the code, extracting hashes, so extracting data from the operating system, but finalizing everything at the end. What else is important? Well, we've got a case of a human factor. So is it still important? Well, absolutely. We always can take a picture of a certain type of information. That's why security at the end should be seen as a broader picture. So we've got a reality and feeling that needs to go in place. We've got a situation where the attacker isn't that smart. And technically, every single attack has its own context. If it's written in your national language, then, well, there is still a context that can help us to fight it. We've got, at the end, technology, where, of course, everything can be nicely done, and it can be done because technology allows us for that. But again, we still have a situation, as we mentioned, where we can take a picture and get this information out of the company. So that at the end, and this is how I would finalize the keynote, we need to look at the cybersecurity from a broader picture. It's not only technology, but it's also social. It's also how do we hire people? Who is our domain admin? Because as we've seen in the data protection API, that person could maybe extract our secrets. There are a couple of other places like measurement, security awareness, incident response. So all of these should be taken into consideration while building the cybersecurity posture in the organization. There's a lot of different types of materials. They're like quite generic, so they're not that great. That's why in cybersecurity sharing is caring. So that I would love to leave you with these 11 cybersecurity questions. Just this, I mean, seriously, not much, right? But have a look, because there's a couple of things to think about that we like to ask our customers when they're designing their good cybersecurity architecture. One of my favorite things is, and let me just give you this thought and leave you with that. As a security consultant, when I'm getting access to someone's environment, it's really a matter of trust, which is a very unpopular word in security, isn't it? Because it should be all black and white. You get access or you don't. But sometimes you are like trusting someone, so the customer is trusting us. And that's a good thing. Now, here's the bad thing. Do you actually trust a person who is coming to your environment? Because as a privileged person in the customer's environment, I'm getting in. Okay, I'm in. I do have access to the customer's data. Could I copy all stuff from the file server to my laptop, finish the pen test, and leave? And this is how I would steal the company's know-how. So possible. I'm always thinking about that. Yeah. Thank you for trusting. Yeah. So this is in general the case. But could I be the bad person? Absolutely yes. That's why information protection nowadays makes so much sense. And there's not only AIP, Azure Information Protection, but a couple of other solutions, but that's a new trend. That's why at the end, summing up, understanding it's a key to security, preventing it's much, much easier than actually fixing different types of situations. Being in a forensic investigation project, it's a little pain in the back because you kind of don't know what you're searching for and you are relying on someone's imagination. That's why it makes sense, of course, to not only test our environment regularly, especially in the current times, but also look at this crazy slide with the cybersecurity reference architecture that I was showing and think of what of that could provide us enough information to keep us more secure. And with that, have a look at our new quiz. It's no registration, nothing. It's just a pure fun for knowledge. Test yourself against us in cybersecurity. And thank you so much, guys, for listening to the whole presentation. Hopefully, at the end, we're going to be all a little bit more secure while we fix at least part of these attacks of the industry that I was talking about by implementing appropriate measurements. Thank you so much and have a lovely day. Thank you.